Hello, welcome back to this Microsoft Virtual Academy, all about hybrid IT management, specifically focusing in on automation. I'm still Matt McSpirit, Technical Evangelist, and in this module, we're following on from previous modules where we've looked at how you get started with automation, and then how you build some runbooks using PowerShell, PowerShell Workflow, and the Visual Designer. And now we're going to be focusing in on how you can actually reuse other people's work through the gallery. So Beth, thanks for joining me. Before we learn about the gallery, what do you do at Microsoft? Bring us up to speed.
I've been at Microsoft for about 3 years now.
Nice.
Some of the other products that our team releases are Service Management Automation and Orchestrator. So I was going to say SMA because I'm used to saying
all
SMA.
That acronyms, just, SMA or SMA, whatever
SMA,
works.
SMA,
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
And you've been at Microsoft since 2013. You've done events as well, like Ignite.
Yeah, so I've done some events. I've included a link of some of the sessions that we've done at Ignite.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. So, what is this automation gallery about? I mean, it seems to me as a great way of being able to reuse other people's work, which I love because it speeds things up for me. Is that generally what it's all about?
Yeah, that's definitely what it's about. So it's a gallery of community content. So it has both Microsoft and members of the community can publish content there, and they can publish scripts or PowerShell modules. And what that allows us to do is to go in, so you don't have to start from scratch. So you can go in and look at the gallery to find some sort of task that you might want to do, so to help get you started.
Right, so it could be something simple like deploy a VM, or it could be something much more complex.
Exactly, and we have tons of content in both of the galleries. So the two sources for the gallery, so you can find it from within Azure Automation, or you can go outside to either PowerShellGallery.com or TechNet Script Center.
Yeah, the PowerShellGallery.com seems quite a catchy link, I think.
Yeah,
it's easy
pretty
to remember, memorable. Yeah, what do you need? A gallery for PowerShell? PowerShellGallery.com.
Yep, that's it. Yeah.
That's it. We need a TV ad for that. Yep. So what kind of modules can we find in there? Give us some examples.
So I'll actually walk you through and show you some examples later on, but there's tons of modules. There's the AWS, all of the Azure modules are there, and I think there's over 600 right now, so there's just a ton of content out there if you need to, for your building blocks to get started. Okay,
and how do so once you get on the module gallery, how do you navigate? Is it easy to click around, or is there search terms and stuff?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different search terms that you can go by. So when you enter the module gallery from your automation account, you can browse by a number of different pieces of metadata. So you can search for the name, you can search for content, you can search for tags, the author. The other cool thing that I really like is you can search by the commandlet. So if you have a commandlet in your script and you don't know what module it came from, you can search from that as well.
So you're really getting down in the weeds there. I know the commandlet, so I'm going to search for that. And it gives you all of the modules that use or contain that commandlet?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, cool, nice. So that's the module gallery.
Yep.
What's the other gallery?
Yeah, so the Runbook Gallery, and that's powered by Script Center, allows you to search for runbooks. So we have 3 different types of runbooks in Azure Automation. You have PowerShell runbooks, PowerShell Workflow runbooks, and then you also have graphical runbooks. And you can find all of these through this gallery here.
And they're the 3 that we learned about in the previous couple of modules.
Yep.
Right, yeah. Okay. So there's modules that we can search for. There's the runbooks that we can search for. Would you need both? I mean, would you download some modules and some runbooks and combine them together to make it all work, or would one bring in the necessary dependencies?
Yeah, so it really depends what you're looking to do. So it's possible. Azure Automation actually ships a number of modules out of the box.
Right.
So we ship a number of the Azure RM or ARM modules, and then the Azure Service Manager, that module. So you can use those right out of the box, but if you're missing a module, you can import it in from the gallery and then use it in your own runbook, so you can use it as a building block to build your own script. Or you can actually import a module and then import a script that uses that module.
Gotcha. So there's some linkage there between the two.
Yep.
Cool. So you wanted to show us how this all works, how people get started with the gallery?
So I'm just going to hop into my automation account right now. And there's 2 different entry points today for the gallery. So you can go into Assets and go to Modules. And you can see I have a bunch of different modules in my account already. So some of these modules, like this OMS Alert Helper, are not a global module, so that means that it's not provided by Microsoft, and I've imported it myself.
It's not in the box, essentially, when you
Yeah,
create it.
exactly.
Okay.
Or if I go to my Azure module over here, this should be one that should be provided from, so you can see, yes, it's a global module, which means that Microsoft, so the automation team, is actually shipping it for you, and you can use those modules in your runbooks right away.
So just so I understand then, so something that ships by default in the box when you sign up and you register your account and stuff, that's a global module because it's built by Microsoft and it's included in the box. If you found a module in the gallery that was provided by Microsoft, would that be a global module as well?
No, we wouldn't consider it a global module because the global modules will actually update for you. Right. So you can see I'm on version 1.03 right now.
Right.
When there's newer versions, we actually will roll out those newer versions. When you import a module in yourself, so if you deploy it from the gallery, you're then responsible for updating that module, and it gives you a little bit more control. So you might want to update the module and then make sure all your scripts that are using that module are updated.
Okay. That makes sense. Good to know.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. So you can see there's two different ways you can add modules here. So one, if I click Add a Module, I can actually import local modules from a local file. I can also browse the gallery here. So as I mentioned before, I can do things like search for a commandlet. So if I search for Start Azure RM Automation.
You just know that one off the top of your head.
Yeah, I know a lot of those commands. Yeah.
You should be proud of that.
So I can see when I click into this, I can see a description of the module, who it was created, any tags, and if there are dependencies. I can also click over to the source project and view it in the PowerShell gallery. So for example, if I click into the PowerShell gallery, I actually get over here, and I can view more information about the module itself.
Nice. Useful stuff. And there's quite a bit of information actually on here, like how many downloads, the version, when it was last updated. It's all useful stuff.
Yep, yeah. So when I click import, so this, so what automation actually does is it checks to make sure that the dependencies are present in your automation account. Right. So you can see here, we don't have quite the last profile module, and since all of the ARM modules have dependencies on the profile module, those all need to have certain versions specified. Okay. So we give you a little bit of a helper, so you can say, okay, great, I need to actually import this one before I import the Azure Automation module.
So it doesn't do it for you at this stage, it just tells you?
Doesn't do it for you at this stage, although that is a feature that we're looking at adding in the future.
Right now.
You should go to user voice and request it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do that later today.
Okay. So if I click on this and then I go to import, so this is going to be the module that that I need, so the Azure RM profile module. Yep. And I click on OK right here. Am I clicking on that?
There we go.
So what that's going to do is it's going to take that module from the PowerShell gallery and actually load it into your automation account.
Right.
So that process is a few different steps. So you can see that first it imports, so it's now in my account, but then all of the different activities that are contained in that module need to be extracted so you can use it in your runbooks.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so it will show up.
This process is going through.
Exactly. So that's what that process is going through right now. So when the activities are finished extracting, this will go away, and you'll actually be able to use this module.
Nice. And looking at the size there, it's only quite small, so 1.3, well, just over a meg. Do they vary massively? Are some modules huge compared to this one?
Yeah, I would say the Azure module is quite large right now. So yeah, but most of them are not as large as the Azure module. So this is probably about average, yeah.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. So as I'm importing that, I'm just going to let that go. I actually wanted to walk through a scenario today and talk about using a Linux module.
Great. Brave.
Yeah.
Microsoft loves Linux.
Yeah. So if I click on here, I can see that there's actually a number of modules that are related to Linux in the PowerShell gallery. Nice. So the one that I'm going to use is from one of my teammates, Joe Levy.
Yeah, who we'll be hearing from later in the course.
Yep. So
busy building modules.
Yep. So this module, you can see it has one function which invokes an SSH command, and you can view more information on it. And so I actually already have this imported into my automation account, so I'm not going to re-import it.
And you're not going to skew his download numbers as well by re-importing?
By re-importing it, yeah, exactly. So what's going to happen then, so I'm just going to browse back to my module list just to show you guys that it's there. So I can see that I have the module in my account. It's available and ready for use right now. So if I go back to my runbooks list, so now I'm going to hop into the runbook gallery. So you can see I can add a runbook. So I think Chris may have covered this, but you can create a new runbook or import one from your local file system.
Yep.
But if you don't want to start from scratch, if you want to look at somebody else's script to see if somebody else out there has done the task that you want to do.
Yeah. We don't call that cheating. It's not plagiarism. It's reuse.
It's
why
reuse.
Reinvent the wheel? Yeah,
exactly.
I'm all for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, so in the runbook gallery, you can see you can also search. So you can search for the name, different authors. So I could search, for example, for myself, which I'll show. I have a few different runbooks in there.
Is that a common gallery search, your name? Or?
I don't think so. So I could search for myself there. I can also use these filters on the right-hand side. So for example, if I knew that I only wanted Microsoft official content, and maybe I only want to see graphical runbooks here, I could actually click OK. And then this is going to filter down, so I only have graphical runbooks, and you can see that these are all official Microsoft scripts.
Yeah.
So that's actually not what I'm looking for now, but I'm just going to go back.
We try and make it difficult for you by only giving you a fifth of the button size to click on.
Yeah, it's very difficult to get that one right there.
And the taskbar.
Okay, great. So I'm actually going to import this script that I published to the gallery. So it's a pretty simple one. It's just going to use that invoke SSH command. So when I click into this, there are actually a few different things to show here. So one, I can see that this is a PowerShell runbook. We have the icon. I can see what tags are on it. I can see how many downloads. Nobody's giving me a rating yet.
Hint, hint.
And
you need to publicize the runbook more.
Yeah. And you can click on that, and then you get additional information. So you can see you get a description. I can actually link over. So if I click on this link, this is going to take me over to the source project in TechNet Script Center.
Right.
And then you also get, which I think is the most important part, you get a preview of what this script is going to do. Now this one's pretty short, but you would see this. If it's a textual runbook, you get to see the text in the runbook. If it's a graphical runbook, you'll see the visual representation of what that is.
Nice.
So now that I've decided that this is the runbook that I want to import, I'm actually just going to click import right here, and let's see. It allows you to change the name. So if I wanted to call this like Beth, for example, it would allow me to do that. You can add in your description, and then you just get a preview of what type you're importing in.
So by importing using this method, is that essentially the same as, or as if I went to the TechNet Center that you opened before and downloaded manually that way? Can I reach the same goal by both methods, essentially?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just a bit easier.
Yeah, so we're just trying to make it so you don't need to leave your account and save you some steps, because otherwise you're downloading it and then you're uploading it. And yeah, so but either way works. It's definitely the same thing.
Right.
So once I import that runbook becomes mine. It's in my automation account, and I can do whatever I want with it.
Right.
So, for example, if I wanted to come in, I can click on the Edit button, and I can decide to modify things. So, for example, in this case, I might not want to actually install the updates, so I might change that parameter. Just going to save that there. And you can see just in this runbook, this is doing a few different things. So it's getting a connection. So this is going to be a required configuration step. I've already done it in my account.
Okay.
And then it just invokes the command that's being passed in from here. So if I go to my test pane over here, I can see that I have a mandatory connection name. Oops. Let me just copy this. So I have a connection name, and it's going to run this default command over here. So while this is running, so this is actually going to remote into my Ubuntu machine over here and run this command to list all the updates. There's one additional required step here. So if I hop back into, I'm just going to close out of this and go back to my account over here. And if I go under assets, so when I imported that SSH module, modules in automation can have one additional file, which is actually a connection file. So it's just a JSON file that helps users in their runbooks not have to specify all sorts of parameters. It'll collect things together in an object. So when I imported that SSH module, it also created a connection for me. So when I click under connections and I go to add a connection, so I can just say test right here and click on type, I see that a number of the modules that I have actually have connections in here. And then when I click on SSH, you can see there are a number of different properties that I fill out. So that's all specified in the module file that was published to the PowerShell gallery.
Okay.
And then in your runbook, usually there'll be two different parameter sets. One will allow you to use a connection to help simplify your workflow. And one will just take all of these parameters in.
Right.
So I can see here if I specify my computer name, port, username, and password. So I would be able to set all of those properties, and that's actually what I'm using in my runbook. So I can see in here I already have a few different connections that are set up already.
Okay, nice. But that's specific to that particular machine. What if you had a lot of machines?
Yeah, so that's it's specific to that particular machine. If you had a lot of different machines, you could either have a lot of different connections and just set the different parameter in your runbook. So whenever you scheduled it, you might want to do that. Right. You would also be able to, if you wanted, you could put it in a file and specify it in a like JSON file or something. Right. So there are definitely other workrounds that you could do if you
can use versus hard coding.
Yep.
Machine 1, machine 2, machine 3, machine 4. Right. Okay,
yep.
Great.
So I'm just going to pop back over to my runbook over here. So this looks like the one that I just created. And if I pop back over to my edit and then hop open to the test pane over here, we should see that this has completed successfully. And then I can see all of the different updates that were run. So you can see sort of from the end to end how much more simple it was. I didn't have to think about authoring the module. I just got those building blocks right away. Yeah. And then going from the gallery, I was able to start off with a script, and I really didn't have to do any authoring in here. But if I wanted to do authoring and customizing, I could do it.
Right, nice. So, and yeah, you could take somebody else's resources, somebody else's module, somebody else's runbook, and just tweak it how you see fit. Yeah. I guess you could then re-upload to the community.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. With a different name, with a different runbook, and whatever else. So, yep. Cool. So is there anything else that people need to know about the gallery? And obviously we've covered downloading modules, integrating the modules into your existing environment. You've got loads of stuff around using runbooks, and you've shown a demo of an example that it's not just about Microsoft, it's heterogeneous as well. What if I start to, dust off the old coding fingers and start creating something? What can I do? How can I help? Yeah, so we really like to have the community contribute to the gallery, and that's really how we have so much content on that, where we have active community members. So there are two different places that you can go to contribute. So again, you can go to Script Center. So I have a URL here that provides some instructions for best practices for uploading scripts that will run in Azure Automation. So things like tagging is important. Yes, exactly. So I'm showing here the three most important ones. One, we only pull content that shows up in the Windows Azure category. Note, though, that if you're in Azure Automation, we support hybrid scenarios with Hybrid Runbook Worker. So you don't necessarily need to have your samples be cloud-focused. Right, yep, good point. And we'll be covering hybrid and on-prem automation later on. Yep. But then some of the other requirements are that you actually have to upload the file that you want people to use. So it has to have either the graphical runbook or the PowerShell script attached to it. And then you also have to include a code snippet in the upload as well. Right, and the code snippet is... Explain to us what that means. Oh, yeah. So when you're actually uploading to Script Center, there's a little place where you can click to add code snippet. And typically what you want people to do is to know what's in your runbook without having to download. It's almost like that that green commented section at the top of your Runbook.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can put you can put in some comments. You could put in the entire script.
Right.
So just to let people know what they're about to download before they download it.
Nice.
And of course, as you mentioned before, we want people to tag and write good descriptions so our users know what they're getting before they import.
More downloads as well, and ratings as well, which is important. So that's the Script Center. What about the PowerShell Gallery? Do I need to register for that? Can I just log in as anybody?
Yeah, so you need to do a one-time registration where you'll create an account and you'll get an API key with that you can use to publish your content there. And you can actually publish right now modules or scripts to the PowerShell Gallery, so we encourage you to publish both there. There's a ton of content there too. So
cool. Nice. So hopefully you found that useful. There's loads of cool stuff about using the gallery. I'm all for using other people's work. It really accelerates how quickly you can start to deploy automation within your environment and benefit and search through. Make sure you use the resources that Beth has provided, because it gives you a chance to actually accelerate how quickly you can start to use automation in your environment, tweaking what's there, adding to what you've already built yourself as well. So loads of cool stuff there. So thanks, Beth, for helping us understand how we can use the gallery. And in the next module, we're going to be focusing more on how you start to use existing investments in System Center and bring those forward in to automation, Azure Automation, OMS Automation, and so on. So thanks, and join us then. Hello, and welcome back to this Microsoft Virtual Academy on hybrid IT management, where we're focusing in on automation. Now, we've covered loads of stuff so far, such as how you get started with OMS automation, and also how you start to build runbooks using PowerShell, PowerShell Workflow, and also the Visual Designer. But what we're going to do now in this module is start to look at how we start to trigger some of these runbooks through a variety of different means. And to help us do that, we've got Jamie from the OMS Automation team to help us. So welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us what you do at Microsoft.
All right, so I'm a program manager intern here. I started just last year, end of August. And pretty much I've been working on designing some features that are still to come out.
Cool. So secret sauce.
Yeah, secret stuff. But we're right now we're going to go over, invoking runbooks, how to kick them off. There's a lot of different ways that we use, and then we'll go over 2 demos of the simplest ways of how to do them, the most common, I think.
Okay, so bring us up to speed with the different ways that you can use the solution to kick off runbooks. Now that we know how to build them, and now we know generally what they are as well for people. So how can we kick them off?
So the number one way to, as we can see here in the chart, the sort of goes from simplest to most difficult or most complicated or involved in actually starting them off. So first way you can see is the portal UX. So it's actually, going in and just clicking Start Runbook. A simple way. The next way, which is probably the most common, is scheduling them. And it's you set up a schedule of sorts. Say, I want this to run hourly, I want this to run daily, and then it kicks it off that way.
But that's something you have to set up specifically.
Yes. Right. So you go in, you set up a schedule, and you can link the schedule to your runbook. And we'll go over a demo of how to do that.
Okay.
The next way is webhooks. So you have a remote service or something, and it can, you can throw in your parameters that you have made in your runbook. You can throw those through the webhook and use that to kick it off remotely using sort of an HTTP post.
So for somebody who's perhaps not as familiar, a webhook would be something where perhaps there's another service or site running elsewhere, and it just says, at this stage in my processing, I need to trigger off this runbook to execute.
Exactly. That's what it's for.
Okay.
And the next thing is monitor. It's also sort of alerts. So in Azure, on your VMs, you can go to alerts and remediation under monitoring, and you can set up an alert to kick off a runbook.
Right.
So you say too many CPU reads in a certain amount of time. I want to restart this.
Right.
Something like that. And it's a great way to sort of run a runbook that you made instead of having to. Once you see the monitor alert, once you see it, then having to go manually do it, it automatically does it.
Right.
So it's a very good automated, way. Automation.
It's all about automation. Yeah. Exactly. Cool.
And then the last way sort of is sort of through PowerShell. So you can, just run PowerShell to actually kick off your runbook. You can, call it through the Azure module. And you can also, using PowerShell, kick off a runbook from a runbook.
Right.
So say you have a bunch of runbooks that do smaller tasks. That's the way you've written them. You can have a sort of master runbook that kicks off these smaller runbooks.
Okay, so that cascades down.
Yeah, exactly.
And triggers runbooks that might trigger other runbooks. Yes, you could have a lot of nested runbooks.
You could go for infinity.
Nice. Okay. Cool. And then the final one is APIs.
Yeah. So the API, it's custom code. Whatever you're doing, you can use authentication. You can use the service principal, which has been talked about in earlier ones. Yep. And it's more complex, it's more involved, and it's very custom stuff and
right,
low level.
So some of these, there's a lot of advantages to some of these. So
yep.
going from simple to complex, as
yep.
you said. But what about some of these disadvantages on this table as well? What are some of those you'd perhaps focus on? Like the scheduler one seems like it's actually really handy, really useful, but the disadvantage there is, what's the parameter value modification? What's that all about?
So parameter value modification pretty much is you have to, so when you pass parameters in, you can have different ones, right?
Right.
And so with a schedule each schedule has its own set of parameters.
Right.
So if you wanted to, run this runbook 5 times with different parameters, you would have to create 5 different schedules.
Right. So there is there's not a global Uber schedule that can just handle everything. You've got to create lots of little ones.
Just so every time you're passing in new parameters, you're creating a new schedule for that.
Right. And from a webhub's perspective as well, I've noticed there seems to be quite a few disadvantages there that obviously it's quite simple to implement, but so talk us through some of those. What do they mean?
Yeah. So one of the things is you have to have the HTTP post.
Right.
And so you have to have that. It's quite simple that way. But it's sort of a letdown is if you don't have those, then you have to create it, set it up.
Right.
The webhook has to be secured like a password. It's sort of once you create it, you get this link, and that's that.
Right.
If you lose it, you lose it.
Right.
If someone else gets it, you can turn off the webhook. You can disadvantage, but you can't sort of.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. You lose it. Kind of thing. So then you just have to create a new one, right? The other thing is there's sort of no job tracking in the remote service.
Right.
There's no parameter, sort of like the schedule. There's no parameter modification. So once you create a webhook, it's got a set parameters that you'll then go through.
Okay. So we've heard a little bit about the different ways to kick these off. So what are the ways that you want to show us to help illustrate some more of this in a bit more depth?
So we'll go through the portal first, and we're going to kick off a VM.
Right.
And then we're going to shut it down with a schedule.
Okay.
Or we're going to port a schedule.
Cool. Let's take a look.
So let's just go to here. Sort of see my account here. So we're going to go to Runbooks. And so we're going to go start Azure VM. And this is just how you simply start it off.
Right.
So you've imported it. This is what you see. I imported this one, from my own. I wrote it and imported it. And so to kick it off, we're just going to run start.
Can we take a look at that runbook as well?
Yeah. So we can view it. So this is something I wrote myself.
Yeah.
Pretty much, it uses the service principal
right.
To log in, which is all this text right here is from the tutorial account.
Yeah.
And below here, pretty much all it does is you input a resource group that you want to look into, and then each VM in it, it's going to check what's it currently doing. Is it start, stop, deallocated, whatever. It's going to then try to start it if it isn't. And if it is, it's just going to skip and say, hey, it's already started. You don't need to do this.
Nice.
So let's go back here and start it off. And then Bruce use the demo I have here, which is the resource group. Set OK. And it's running. So, runbook submitted. And it's going to open up your job here.
Right.
And you can see here it's running. So the next thing we're going to do is go back here. And we're going to set up the stop Azure VM here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go schedule. And you can see here, so you can link a schedule to your runbook.
Right.
I have one. It's morning start.
Okay.
We don't want to do that. You don't want to stop them in the morning. So we're going to just create a new one. And to create a new one, you go here, and we're going to evening. Whoops. If I can type. Evening stop. And we're going to set this up for today.
Okay, great.
When are we going to get out of here? Say
10 p.m.
Yeah, 10 p.m.
10 p.m. on a Friday night. That's what we want.
Working really late, working on those VMs. You got to make sure they're turned on.
Yeah.
And so right now, you can set this as a one-time occurrence. You can set it as a daily or hourly.
Right.
We're going to go daily.
Okay.
And so sort of coming up with schedule is there's going to be a lot more things where you can say, like, I want Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, right now, it's just this, though.
Okay.
So, it runs every one day. That's exactly what I need. And we're going to create that. And then, so, new schedule is created. Parameters here. And this is sort of where we're talking about you link one set of parameters, inputs, to a schedule.
Right, so the one we just created, for instance.
So this will shut down, my Jaffe demo runbooks. And you go there, and OK. And so now, when we, runbooks linked, so when we go to schedules here, we should see that, it's connected to evening stop.
Mm-hmm.
And it's turned on.
Cool.
And so, yeah, we'll
go all the schedules. So the schedule's done. The runbook that we triggered before is run. So that's manual and that's schedule.
So that's manual, that's schedules.
Great.
And yeah, you can also do webhooks. So to do a webhook, you go here, create a webhook. And then what we're going to do is you're going to name the webhook. So we're going to name it Jaffe demo shutdown. And then you set an expiration date for it.
Right.
And then you get the ULR.
So that's the thing you said.
So this is the
secured
password.
like the password. Yeah. So that if you lose that, you're in trouble.
Yeah. So you copy it. It's to my clipboard now, so I can do whatever I want with it.
But could you always come back into the portal and retrieve it from here?
You cannot.
All right. Okay. So I couldn't click on webhook up there where you've got the shutdown and it wouldn't display that link. Wow. Okay.
So we'll come here and double check. Yeah. So this is always, adding a new webhook.
Oh, right. Okay.
So once you get that one chance, so it says in that here, for security, after creating, it can't be previewed or anything, it can't be copied. So you get that one chance to see it, and after that,
it does give you a bright orange warning triangle. So if that's not enough to convince you to copy that and save it somewhere, then who knows? It's so quick to create one, though.
Yep.
It doesn't take long to recreate, but yeah, it's important. And then, like you said earlier, when we were looking at the table, you would take that, pass it to your application or whatever you wanted to trigger this runbook, and it would hit it from here. And
so I can see here what it does. I can see the webhook. I come down here, Jaffe shutdown, and I can see the parameters, and I can turn it on and off. Right. I just can't get that ULR again.
Right. So that's handy. So if you did lose it and you think, I don't want anybody triggering this, I can disable it in that way at least, or delete it, I suppose. Yeah, you can delete. You can delete it, enable it, disable it. Maybe if you're like, I don't want to have this running for a while. Yeah. And you turn it off for a little bit, you can come back and turn it back on. Right. So you don't potentially lose it. Nice. Maybe you wrote it down somewhere what it was. Yeah, maybe. Maybe on the off chance, seeing as we only remind you to write it down once or twice. So. Great. Okay. Yeah. So we looked at the portal, triggering a simple runbook. We scheduled one. We looked at webhooks. Then that gives people a pretty good idea of what's going on with how you trigger runbooks. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you found that useful. We've still got lots more to cover, including loads of modules on DSC and integrating with System Center and much more. So make sure you stick with us through the rest of the course on hybrid IT management, focusing on automation. So thanks, Jamie. Thank you. And keep on watching. Thank you. Hello, welcome back to this Microsoft Virtual Academy, all about hybrid IT management, specifically focusing in on automation. I'm still Matt McSpirit, and as part of the course, we've covered a huge amount of things already, from building workflows, PowerShell workflows, PowerShell authoring in the gallery, visually as well. We've looked at how you get started, how you use the gallery to import modules and runbooks and so on, a whole host of stuff. And if you haven't watched any of those modules already, what are you doing? You need to go back and watch those because they're incredibly important. But now we're going to change direction slightly and introduce a topic that should be incredibly important to you as you embark on your automation journey. And that's around desired state configuration. So I've brought along Joe to help us understand just what we need to know for DSC. Joe, tell us what you do at Microsoft.
Sure. So my name is Joe Levy. I'm a program manager on the Operations Management Suite. I've been at Microsoft for about 4 years now. I started by working on System Center Orchestrator, which is process automation for your data center and your IT within the firewall. Then worked on Azure Automation, which is process automation for your Azure resources. And now I work on automation in the Operations Management Suite, which is process and desired state configuration automation for all of your resources in the cloud, on-premise, Windows and Linux, wherever they may be, managing them at scale easily with automation.
Nice, and people can get in touch with you on Twitter. You've got your Twitter handle there, and also you've done the circuit around the various speaking events, the Tech Ed Ignite. So I guess a lot of your sessions will be recorded on Channel 9 as well.
All around. Yeah.
Nice, very cool. So help us understand what we're trying to solve for with desired state configuration. Why is it so important?
Sure. So essentially the problem we're trying to solve here is keeping the thousands of servers running my services configured correctly is incredibly complicated and error prone, right? If you have a giant infrastructure deployment of systems on-premise and different clouds, thousands of machines at scale, doing configuration management across all of them can be really hard. And the reason for that is because in addition to the fact that there's many servers and they have some state some configuration you want to keep them in, that's different in different roles. So you might have web servers, you might have database tiers, worker tiers. So there's configuration specific to certain roles where every machine in the role should have the same configuration. There's configuration that all of your machines should have in addition to that specific role configuration. And sometimes there's server-specific configuration as well. So managing all the different configurations for all the different machines, especially when you're talking about a live company where there's lots of people and processes that have access to these machines and may accidentally, or because they think they're doing the right thing, go and make changes and take the service out of the desired state in terms of a state where it is able to best run the services those machines are set up for, or in a way where you're kind of following the compliance requirements of your country or your organization.
Yeah, so you have an optimal configuration that you're looking for, and occasionally things can drift, maybe like you say, human intervention or I guess otherwise, but you want to keep it in that optimal state as much as you can.
Exactly, exactly. And different people are responsible for different parts of the configuration. Configuration needs change over time. Machines, you're usually kind of scaling up over time, so there's more and more machines to manage, and how do you make sure those machines match the earlier configuration you've set up on other machines? So it's a big problem when you're talking about huge scale of machines.
Yeah, not achievable if you're just using essentially GUI tools.
Right,
It makes it a lot more difficult.
Take you way too long. If you want to sleep every night, I wouldn't recommend using GUI tools when you have thousands of machines to manage.
There you go. You heard it here first. You sound very much like Mr. Snover. He's very into that. So I guess, do you want to, we've talked through the problem and help you understand just exactly what challenges, and I'm sure it's something that you guys are facing at home as well, and not specifically at home, at work perhaps more so. How can we start to solve it?
Sure. So the first thing I want to dive into is kind of, you've seen the automation service and a lot of process automation today on how you can run scripts in our service. But what I'd like to do is show how you do configuration management using those scripts. And it does work, it is great, it's a lot better than manual, but later we'll talk about the even better way to do it with these desired state configuration type tools.
Cool.
So I'd like to dive right into that demo.
Go for it, yeah.
All right. So I've got here my OMS Automation account. By the way, this automation service is part of the Operations Management Suite, and it's also a standalone service you can use as Azure as well. So that's why you'll hear automation in both ways. It's the same product. It's just kind of you can use it as part of the management suite or as a standalone service, depending on your needs.
Cool.
So I have my automation account here, and I've written this script right here called Set Windows IT Rules. And what it does is it takes in a VM connection string and a VM credential asset name, which it grabs from our automation asset store, which I'm sure earlier sessions covered.
Yep.
And then what it's going to do is let me actually kick this off, and then we'll talk about it while it's running. So I've imported this script, because we can run scripts in automation, as a runbook into here. And I'm actually just going to kick this off. So I'll hit start, and then I will provide the parameters for a specific machine I've set up that is not following the configuration that I've said it needs to follow. And we'll talk about what that is in a second.
So this one's perhaps drifted out of optimal configuration, or somebody's tweaked it.
Right.
Okay.
So if I go back to the script that I've written, you can see I have a script in here. It's about 55 lines. And what it's doing is it's taking in a VM to connect to. It's WinRM remoting into that VM. And in this case, the desired state I'm trying to make sure is there is that the Operations Management Suite agent is there. And that's really important, because the Operations Management Suite lets you do all kind of management and gain all kinds of insights into your machines, regardless of where they're running, in the cloud, on-prem, Windows, Linux, etc.
Yeah.
So having that MMA agent there and running is very important. So it checks for that. This machine actually doesn't have the MMA agent installed.
Right.
So was configured will return false. And then you'll see down here, if it sees that it's not configured, the next thing it does is actually go and auto-correct that behavior, right? Because we want to put it back into the desired state, the correct state for this machine to be in, having the MMA agent installed and running.
Nice.
I've actually just commented out the install step for that, so I can rerun this demo, but this would be the line to do it for the MMA agent.
Right, so it would actually go ahead and install the agent using essentially a silent install. Right, nice.
And then the next thing it does is I want some reporting on the fact that my machine is not matching the desired state. So it's going to actually send an email and it's going to invoke in line another runbook to actually send that email.
Right.
So one runbook calling another, the email logic in here, all the configuration logic in this top level set Windows IT rules runbook.
Right, nice.
So if I actually go and check on this runbook, you can see it's completed. If I go to output, I can see it was not following the IT rules. Autocorrect succeeded, which it would have if I did the install.
Yeah.
And then it sent an email to me to say, hey, something was not following the right state. You know, you probably want to be notified that things weren't in compliance with your desired state.
Right.
So here's an example of just the email I got earlier when I sent this. It's just telling me, hey, your machine's not following the rules. So that way I could talk to people responsible for the machine, go and figure out what happened maybe if I want to, or at least just know, hey, some auto-correction took place.
Right. And we learned in earlier modules that you can do things like scheduling. So I could have this run on a daily basis, or...
That was exactly the next thing I was going to show. You wouldn't want to run this once, and you don't want to have to put in the parameters like I did from a file every time you run it.
Right.
So you'd go to schedule, and then you'd actually hook it up to a new or existing schedule. So if I wanted to run it daily, I could create a new schedule or select this existing one. And then I have this runbook running every day with my parameters already defined on what machines it should check to make sure that the machines are matching the desired state, using this imperative kind of, here's the first step, here's the second step, here's the third step process runbook to do all the checking of if it's in the desired state, reporting to me if it's not, and auto-correction.
So you only get the report in this case if it's not. If everything is fine, if it's got the agent already, you wouldn't receive anything.
Yeah, but I mean, it's all up to what you implement in the runbook. You could have it send a different email to say, hey, everything's all good.
Yeah, you're amazing.
You just may end up getting, hopefully, a lot of emails saying, hey, everything's all good, right?
Nice.
So that's how it would work with runbooks today.
Right.
But there's some problems with that I'd kind of like to talk through. It's a lot better than manual, right?
Absolutely.
Because if thousands of machines, I'm not going to manually go and check every day to make sure in the desired state, it just won't scale. And I want to do that because I want to prevent the problems from happening. I don't want to only react to issues once they've happened, because that can affect my uptime, can affect if auditors come around and I'm not showing 100% compliance all the time, it can look bad. So some of the downsides, it's great to do this with a runbook over manual, but some of the downsides of that are that I actually had to write a whole process, step 1 through 10, to just say, here's my desired state. I want to make sure this desired state is enforced, right? Essentially, I should just be able to declare, hey, here's what I want, and let the underlying system take care of making it so, and reporting to me through some standard interface on whether it is or isn't matching that state. I had to write the test, the set, and the report logic, instead of just writing this is what I want, and the testing of that, the setting of that, and the reporting of that to being taken care of by kind of the underlying management system.
Right.
Not to mention this was all over WinRM, so it meant I had to actually open a port into my machine, give automation a credential to access my machine, which I'd rather not have to do, right? Because you want to, if you don't have to open ports or open firewall rules, you don't want to have to do that. The thing I wrote, that script I showed you, the 55-line script, you can't immediately tell what it's doing just by looking at it, right? You have to basically understand PowerShell, understand the process and each step of the process to really know what it's doing.
Yeah.
So all these things, and the fact that I had to schedule it, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just I have the script and it just works. I have to put that on a schedule so that it executes every day, rather than just saying this is the desired state, make sure that state stays in place.
So there are some downsides, but like you say, it is still a stronger solution than manual.
Definitely, way better than manual. And for a lot of people, that's the first step. That's where they go to first. They do it as a runbook, and that is a great way to do it. It's just there's always a better way to do it, right? And that's what I want to talk about, is the kind of the best way you can do this.
Cool. So you've set yourself up now. So what is the best way to do this?
Ta-da! The best way to do this. PowerShell desired state configuration, right? So what PowerShell DSC is basically a way for you to declare exactly what that state you want to match is, and say, make it so.
Right.
And you either push to certain machines to say, here's the desired state, stay in this state, or at least alert me if you go out of the state if you don't want auto-correction.
Yeah.
It's much more readable because it's just a declaration of what you want. in a PowerShell file. And then you can take that file, put it in source control, diff that file over time to see, hey, how has my configuration of my machines changed over time? And by looking at every kind of commit to your source control, you can see exactly who made what changes when. And you can do things like code review on your machine configuration before you actually push out, you know, your configuration to production. Other people can look at it as opposed to just an IT admin saying, hey, I think I want to update this config, asking their friend. There's no kind of trail, and there's no kind of formal review process to make sure exactly what I said I was going to do is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So in terms of kind of what this looks like, if you look at the top here, the structural configuration, you can see it's much nicer about, I want to ensure that a certain Windows feature is present, and I can still parameterize that, right, if I want to. Or in this case, ensure that this website is present on the box. Versus having to write code that not just checks whether it's there, sets it to be there, does some reporting to me, and has to be idempotent in that if it needs to make sure it doesn't try to set it up if it's already set up, because then you could end up with a lot of websites on the box, or you could end up with an error when it tries to set up something that's already set up, right? So this first way, just declaring exactly what I want, is much nicer. And if we look at that exact same desired state I wanted to enforce, this is what it looks like as a PowerShell desired state configuration file. You can see it's very easy to read. I'm just saying I want to have a service running.
And you've given it the name
service.
OI service, or is that something that's specific?
So you get to define what goes here. That's kind of your essentially friendly name identifier for this rule.
Okay.
So in this case, I'm saying I want the health service, which I guess is what the MMA service is.
That is the actual name of the agent.
Is running. And then I'm saying before I do this, I need to make sure that the package is there, right? And so the package one down here is just saying ensure that this package that contains the MMA bits is actually on the box, right? And it's giving the details on how to check that it's there, install it if it isn't there, but in a declarative way. Ensure that this package is present. This is saying ensure so this is actually installing the package.
Yeah.
So ensure the package is installed. This is the one that actually goes and makes sure the package is, the kind of MSI is there beforehand. So ensure that the bits are on the box, ensure that the package is installed, and ensure that the service is running. So I can very easily declare, hey, this is the state I want it to be in. Make the MMA agent be there, make it running, make it so.
Yeah. Seems almost too easy.
Very easy.
Yeah.
And in terms of what the lifecycle of these items looks like, you have that configuration file that I just showed. Here's another sample one where it's essentially just saying make sure IIS is present on the box and make sure ASP.NET is present. So a very simple one. But regardless of what it is, you take that configuration, you run one simple command to compile it into these managed object format files that the machines actually understand. And then you either push those files to the machines that should match that desired state, or you put those files on what's called a DSC pull server. And what that is a way for, you don't have to have any inbound access to these machines set up. The machines will be configured to reach out to you to say, hey, is there some configuration I should match? And it'll actually reach out to you. So it doesn't need any inbound ports or access. It just reaches out to the pull server to pull down what it needs. So
for instance, if you had your example before where you had your 1,000 servers that were manually configured essentially, and we looked at the first solution where you could configure it using PowerShell. Now we're looking at DSC. You've essentially got your 1,000 servers talking to this one, or I suppose a few, perhaps for redundancy, pull nodes. Would that be correct? And then they would say, you'd have already configured them to ask the pull node on a frequency. And then say, am I still current? If not, update me, for instance.
Exactly. What configuration should I match? It'll check every 30 minutes so that if you did change the configuration for a set of machines, it'll, without you having to remote into any machines, when you're talking about 1,000 machines, that's a lot to remote into and open ports on. They'll just check in every once in a while and say, hey, what configuration should I match? Then they'll make sure they're matching it, or report to you if you don't want autocorrection. They'll just report to you in exactly what ways they're not matching it.
And I guess 1,000 servers all reporting back to one server seems like it could be a lot of network traffic, but I'm guessing it's fairly minimal. It's just a tiny piece of information.
Yeah, there's very little going over the wire. I'm sorry. It's not a very heavy load. It's just saying it's a ping every like 30 minutes to say, hey, is there something new for me to do? And then if there is, the MOF is sent down, but the MOFs aren't really huge. And another thing, and we'll kind of get to this, is if you are worried about, like you mentioned, how do I take care of redundancy and high availability for my DSC pull server? So if my single box that I'm using goes down, I don't lose my ability to manage my data center or my clouds. That's where kind of this Automation DSC service comes in, which is even better than PowerShell DSC itself.
Right. So we're really building up to good, better, best, ultimate.
The ultimate,
platinum.
ultimate edition.
Right,
yes.
nice, yeah. Cool, okay.
Configuration ultimate.
So we can do roles, we can do features, because I noticed on the previous slide when we had the configuration of SharePoint, it's installing IIS. The role, ASP.NET is a sub-feature or a sub-role of IIS. It can do the individual packages. I mean, but it just seems like it can do everything.
It can do a whole bunch of things. Files, registry, Windows features, services, packages being installed. It can do things for Linux as well. PowerShell DSC is cross-platform, and the whole platform is extensible. So just like you can write PowerShell modules with new commandlets to call in your scripts, you can, in your PowerShell modules, create new DSC resources that take care of the details of. So Windows feature, for example, is a DSC resource, and they've taken care of, okay, assuming I have these parameters set up for me, it should be present, and here's the name of the feature to make sure it's there. It takes care of the making sure the item is there. If it's not there, saying a false to no, you're not matching the desired state and in this exact way. So all you have to worry about is declaring the state you want, and the resource kind of takes care of that imperative process of how do I make sure it's matching whatever state it was passed to me.
So for instance, web server, DSC on the whole has an understanding that web server is the role of IIS. Because you called it IIS, but you could have called it something different. Is that right? On the previous slide?
IIS, that name right here is totally your choice as to what you put there.
But web server is the important, meaningful. That is actually the IIS.
Yeah, this is the kind of encode name, regardless of whether you're using DSC or PowerShell commandlets. That's the encode name for what IIS is. The IIS Windows feature is called.
So if it was Hyper-V, it would be Hyper-V.
Right.
If it was
ASP.NET, right? There's that one.
Great. So where do we go from here? So we understand the lifecycle a bit more. You're going to show us some other stuff?
Well, I wanted to show you guys a sample of what DSC actually looks like to start with.
Nice.
So let's go and do that. So I have this box set up here. You can see I have this configuration that I've written on this box. It's not actually applied yet, but it's just saying make sure IIS is present, right? We're used to seeing that, and make sure these two files are present and have this contents in them, right?
Nice. Okay.
So then what I can do is actually, like I said, you have the configuration, you compile it, and then you push it or have it pulled from a pull server.
So how do you compile it? Just out of a quick question, where would you go? Do you do that in ISC as well, or?
Yes, so you can do that in the ISC or in the regular PowerShell console. I mean, this is saved into a PS1 file.
Right.
So when I run this file, that's actually going to declare simple push config as a configuration. And then down here, I just type in simple push config, and that'll actually do the compilation.
All right,
and you can see that spit out a folder on our desktop called simple push config. And inside that folder is the MOF file, which will be called localhost in this case.
Right.
Let me open that up. And in this MOF file is kind of the machine understandable language of, hey, what's the state I should match? It's kind of like there's the C# file and there's the DLL file, right?
Okay, nice.
So that's that file right there. So in my next step after doing that compilation, creating these MOF config documents is to actually apply it. And I can do that with a command called start DSC configuration. And so I've kind of preset up that command, and I'll run it now. And you'll see what this is going to do is actually say, apply this configuration to this machine, and when we're done, the machine is going to have IIS installed, and it's going to have these two files present. And let me show you that these files actually don't exist right now. So you can see those two files that should be in the C directory are not there right now, right? And if I actually run this, in this case, I've been running this demo so many times in a row, I need to force it. This will actually put those files in place and make sure IIS is installed.
Right.
So this should only take a second to run because it's not doing too much here, and then I'll have that desired state configured for this server. And I could go take this and run it on as many servers as I want, just declare the desired state, and it's all set up.
Well, you've used files as an example here, but you could have been tweaking the registry, like you said, installing additional roles.
Yeah,
and
anything
features.
you want. There's a PowerShell Gallery, which is kind of community content and Microsoft contributed content that doesn't ship in box for tons of other resources.
Right.
Besides the many that exist in the box. So now if I go to my local C drive, boom, you can see those two files are there. It's matching that desired state, and these files do have the content that they're supposed to have.
Okay.
So that's PowerShell DSC.
There's a good way to ensure that, like you say, files or a certain package or a certain just something exists on the system all the time. Really could be useful. Yeah.
The state that these machines should match, it gets deployed and it stays that way.
Nice. Okay, so what else do we need to know in terms of PowerShell DSC?
Sure, so that's PowerShell DSC, but again, we've been talking about better and better ways to do this. So there's manual, there's running this as a script, which is better, which I showed, and then there's PowerShell DSC, which is better, and now we're going to talk about the best, which is Automation DSC.
Nice. Built it up now.
Exactly. So PowerShell DSC does a great job of making configuration management really easy for your machines, but it also introduces some items you now need to manage. There's the configuration files, which you have many of. There's these MOF files that you have many of, and there's thousands of machines that you need to either push or set up to talk to our pull server to actually pull down these configs and report to, right? And so when we're talking about thousands and thousands of machines, that ends up being a lot of configurations, a lot of MOFs, and a lot of kind of either pushing or pulling machines that need to be set up to use DSC. So some of the kind of things that DSC itself doesn't take care of is limiting access, tracking change, and orchestrating configuration changes. So limiting access is things like making sure only people who should change certain parts of configurations do change those parts of the configurations. Right. It's things like making sure a node that's reaching out to the pull server isn't able to pull down a configuration that's not assigned to it. So for example, if I have some lowly web server and I have an AD configuration on my pull server, I don't want my lowly web server, if it might get hacked, to be able to pull down my full AD configuration, which might expose some other information, right? So that kind of being able to limit access both to people and to what configuration the nodes can pull.
Yeah.
In terms of tracking changes compliance, how do I actually tell who made what changes to configurations when? How do I tell across my whole environment what machines are actually compliant with their desired state and in exactly what ways? And in terms of orchestrating configuration change, upgrade domains are very important when you're talking about deploying changes out. So how do I make sure I only apply my configuration on a per upgrade domain basis and only move on to the next upgrade domain once the last one is done? Or I might have dependencies like the database tier needs to be updated before the web service tier, right? So I need to make sure my new configuration goes out to the database tier before the web service tier, as well as respecting maintenance windows, right? Maybe I only want the new config to be pulled by machines when the machine is in a maintenance window because I don't want it going auto-correcting, which may temporarily take it down, maybe requires a machine restart while it's not in maintenance mode or in a maintenance window.
That makes sense. Well, there's a lot of things that I thought it was going all so well for PowerShell DSC, and now you've mentioned all those things, you think, oh, actually, I didn't think about those. So how do we solve those?
So we solve that with the Automation DSC service, which is this great service that ships as part of Operations Management Suite, where again, you take those configurations, you compile them in our service, you import any DSC resources you want, if you want ones beyond what's shipped in the box, and then you onboard machines and say, hey, these set of machines are assigned these MOFs, these node configurations, and they will just reach up to our service, which you don't have to stand up. It's not like setting up a local pull server. Instead, you just click New Automation Account, and boom, you have a pull server set up. Right. And it scales to whatever needs you have. So as the more machines that start being onboarded to it, it'll just scale to meet the exact needs you have. It's highly available and highly reliable, so you're not worried about one box going down and then suddenly you can't control configuration in your environment or see what machines are compliant. So it's this really good at-scale production configuration management service.
Right, and it's not just, obviously, your graphic with the cloud and with the endpoints that you can target there. There's Azure VM, physical server, on-prem VM. It could be Windows or Linux. I'm guessing it doesn't have to be an Azure VM. Could it be a VM in another cloud?
Just like the rest of the Operations Management Suite, all of the services, including this Automation DSC service, can target Windows, can target Linux, can target on-premise VMs, OpenStack, Azure, AWS, anything else.
Right.
Wherever these machines
as long as it can reach it,
they can be managed.
Cool, nice.
In one interface.
Nice. So have we got a demo of this one?
We do have a demo.
Great.
Let's go to that demo.
Awesome.
So I'll go back to my automation portal where I ran that runbook way back in my first demo. And you can see I've written this configuration here. And this configuration, it's would produce two of these MOF files, two different roles essentially. One is saying, make sure IS is there, make sure these two files are there, and that the content of the files is there. The other one, very similar, except the files are blank, right? So I can actually go and import this into the automation service by just going to configurations, add configuration, and then I would select it, which I'm not going to navigate to, and hit import. I've actually already done that, so here it is sitting right there. And the next thing I would do is, just like I showed compiling locally, you would compile it in the service. So I'll hit compile, and that'll actually kick off a job to do that compilation, the
Generate
production of the
file.
MOFs.
Yep.
And you can see, I'll show you an example of a completed job already, but once it's done, it spits out those 2 MOF files that we have locally, and the MOFs that get spit out are according to what you name your configuration. That's kind of the namespace.
Yep.
And then whatever you define here are kind of the names of the roles, the names of these MOF node configurations, we call them.
Independent node configuration.
Yeah, so web server and web server blank files, and you can see web server blank files. So in a compilation job, you can actually look at if there was an error compiling it into MOFs, or whatever output or warnings, or exactly what source was used for this compilation, since the configuration gets compiled into the MOFs, and the MOFs are actually what gets assigned to the nodes.
Right.
So let's see how this job is doing.
Is there any reason why you
out.
wouldn't create a ginormous configuration file with lots and lots of nodes? Because obviously you've got 2 in that particular example that you had. Could you not just create one massive one that has everything?
You could. I mean, you could do the same thing with a script, right? And it kind of gets unmanageable over time the more
enough,
content you have in one file and the more people who need to make edits to that file.
Yep.
So modularizing it by file, where each configuration kind of maps to one service maybe, or one set of roles that kind of are related, like SharePoint might be the configuration, and in there you might have a node statement, a role for web service and worker and database tier, right? The different roles within that service.
I see. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I was just thinking, could you just have one behemoth? But
you could. Wouldn't advise it.
On the right direction.
Yeah. So you can see this is running now, so it's about to complete because the compilation doesn't actually take very long.
Quite small.
Should be done. There we go. It's completed.
Right.
And you can see these MOFs, these node configurations were produced.
Yep.
And then if I actually go to my nodes, I actually had one machine already assigned to one of the node configurations MOFs that comes out of there.
Okay.
And if I'd hit refresh there, you can see, so it would be pending, which would mean there's something new on the pull server you need to pull, but you haven't pulled it yet. This machine actually happened to just check the pull server right after that, so it's in progress mode.
Right.
So if I actually go to that machine.
So just to clarify for people and myself, a node that you've got listed there is one that is actively asking for configuration optimization.
A node is essentially just a managed endpoint that's pulling configuration from the service.
Great, okay.
So you can see it's pulling down the new MOF. Since I imported the configuration, I compiled it. There might be some new config in the latest version of that configuration that the server is now pulling down. So if I go to that server and I actually force it to pull, you'll see afterwards it will be matching the desired state. It looks like it had already just pulled just because we happened to hit that 30-minute interval.
Yeah.
So I didn't even need to force it in this case.
Okay.
And of course, that desired state said make sure IS is there and make sure those 2 files are there and are blank. So you can see, boom, IS is there.
Yep.
And we have these 2 files here, and they're blank, right? So boom, that desired state is there. But we also talked about how DSC and Automation DSC help solve configuration drift.
Right.
So in addition to pulling config from the server, from the pull server, it'll also continually every 15 minutes run and make sure that the state is enforced. Because when I configured this machine to pull from our pull server, I said autocorrect. Make sure you're in autocorrect mode.
Right.
If anything ever changes from the desired state, set it back. You don't have to do that. You can just set it to report what ways it's not compliant. But in this case, it would set it back. So if I delete one of these files, and
could
again,
it be a delete, or could you change that file?
you could change the content in it. If it was a service,
isn't
you might set it to stopped where the desired state says to have it running. Just some change versus the desired state.
Right.
And then I'll kick off. This will happen every 15 minutes, but I'll force a consistency check to happen now, which will say, hey, you're not matching the desired state anymore. I'm going to put you back into the desired state.
So a force of a consistency check is different from. Would force pull have the same effect though? Essentially, if we'd have run that again.
So what force pull does is it's checking the pull server to say, hey, is there any new desired state versus the desired state I had before that I should match?
Right.
Versus a consistency check is kind of independent, and that's saying of the desired state I last pulled, is the machine matching this?
Gotcha. So you wouldn't use both, you can just do one, right? Okay.
Yeah. So now if I go back here, boom, the file I deleted is back there, so it's continually matching this desired state without me having to go and do anything.
That's awesome.
And if we go back to our pull server, you can see, if I refresh this, the machine is now compliant because we know it's matching the desired state in all the ways. And I can see this status is very useful for determining, are my machines matching the state they should be in? You can see in this case, this one is not, this one tried to, it was in autocorrect mode, but failed to.
Right.
And we'll dig into that in a second. So if I click into here, you can see, boom, it's exactly compliant with the state, the desired state I said it should be
So
compliant
it
with.
lists those individual components of the MOF that we provided before.
At the resource level and the resource instance level. So for example here, this one you can see did have the Windows features it needed, but something was not compliant about the files that were supposed to be there. And if I click into file, I can see exactly this file, this is the friendly name I gave the file, is not compliant versus this one was. So I can see in exactly what ways are my machines not aligning to the desired state that they should be in.
And that one didn't have autocorrect, so because obviously autocorrect
that one was
fix
just
that
reporting.
Yeah.
This other machine does have autocorrect, so when it saw it wasn't matching the state, it tried to match the state, but you can see that failed. And if we click into the specific resource, we can see exactly why it failed. And in this case, it's because the requested feature Weeb server is not found on the target machine, which makes sense because there's no Windows feature called Weeb server. So of course that failed. So troubleshooting without digging
maybe in the future.
One day.
Yeah, we can request that on user voice.
But then my demo will break. So
that one will be fixed.
That'll be fixed, but my demo, I won't have a failed node.
Yeah.
So one more thing I wanted to show is, let's say the desired state for this machine changes. I no longer want it to have blank files. I want it to have IIS and files with content in them. I can easily, and all of this you can do through APIs, commandlets, SDKs, as well as the portal. I can go in and say assign the node, and I can assign it to, instead of web server blank files, the node configuration it's assigned to right now, I can assign it to web server, which is the one that has, if we go back to the ISC,
populated file,
that's the one, that has the files populated.
Right.
And so boom, it is now done. That one's now assigned to it.
Yeah.
You can see it's in pending state because there's something new on the pull server, some new configuration the machine hasn't pulled yet, so we can tell that in the portal. And if I go back to that machine and do that force pull, again, to make it grab this new config now instead of at its regular interval of grabbing it, we'll see that once this is done, it'll say, oh, there's a new desired state for me to assume. It's different than how I was configured right now. I'm going to match that new state, which in this case means no change to IIS since that was already set up, but the files that were blank will no longer be blank.
What if you'd have clicked the force consistency there instead of the force pull? What would it have done?
If I had clicked that first?
Yeah, so we came into this environment, we've reassigned the alternative config to this particular node. You came here, you ran force pull to grab the latest, but if you'd have run consistency, what would have happened?
Right, so the consistency all the consistency does is check against whatever had been pulled last. So in this case, it would still be web server blank files because the last pull pulled that down. So the consistency check will continually check against that. Independently, there's another timer which is for the pull, which is when it actually goes out and it pulls down potentially new desired states. So one is, are there new desired states for me to assume? And the other one is, for the desired state I should assume, am I actually matching it? And if not, I'm going to report or I'm going to autocorrect.
And now that you've pulled down the latest, the consistency check will continue to check against that one.
Exactly. Every 15 minutes it'll go and it'll make sure, because this is an autocorrect mode, that the machine is continually matching my desired state, whatever it may be. So
it's 15 minutes for consistency, and did you say 30 minutes for checking the pull every 30 minutes? Or is that...
so the pull happens every 30 minutes organically. The consistency check happens every 15 minutes. These are configurable. The lowest is around, I think, 15 minutes for each, but the defaults are 15 and 30, as I mentioned. We're also working on kind of lowering those, so there's even less of a need to, in a mission critical sense, ever have to go and onto the machine and say, hey, I need you to pull now, or hey, I need you to consistency check now. So really getting those times more granular.
Cool. Great.
And you can see, boom, that desired state is there. The file is no longer blank. It is now has the contents it should have.
Nice.
And that is automation desired state configuration in the operations management suite.
It's a whirlwind. It's what you appreciate from this when you're coming at it from perhaps somebody who hasn't been as engaged in automation over time, or your idea of automation is very strict scripts that are very tied to very specific machines that have evolved over time, and someone's left the company and now that script, nobody knows how to work it. That kind of automation world. This is just a completely different world, but hopefully you appreciate what Joe's given us here is like a good, you can do some powerful stuff with PowerShell, and then you can start to introduce DSC, and that's better because of the way we can start to configure a lot of systems in one go and maintain, but it's slightly more difficult to manage than what we would get in the best option, which is the automation service.
Exactly.
So, yeah, cool stuff. Hopefully you found that useful. I found it incredibly useful, and there's loads of other resources that you've done as well. There's some other stuff on MVA, and we'll get the links as well for the things you've done in Build and Ignite, or you can search the Channel 9 website for Joe. You'll find loads of content there where we've got more time. He's got more time to go through lots more of this stuff as well.
Sure.
But hopefully you found that useful. Thank you.